The uneasy discovery. The mining colony of Outpost Vega 9 was a lonely place, floating on the edge of human space, surrounded by barren lands and endless stars. It was a world of silence, broken only by the rhythmic pounding of machines and the chatter of tired workers. For years, they had drilled into the rocky crust of the planet, uncovering rare metals and resources needed to fuel Earth's growing expansion into the galaxy. Nothing unusual ever happened there, until now. It started as an ordinary day. The team was deep in the mines, digging through layers of hard rock. Jake Thornton, the lead miner, frowned as his drill hit something strange. A sharp metallic clang echoed through the tunnel. It wasn't the sound of rock. It was something hollow, something that shouldn't have been there. What the hell was that? Jake muttered to himself, wiping sweat from his brow. The other workers gathered around, curious but cautious. As they cleared away the surrounding debris, their tools revealed a smooth black surface, cold to the touch and unlike anything they'd ever seen before. It shimmered faintly under their lights, giving off an eerie blue glow. "Is this metal?" one of the miners asked, hesitating to touch it. "It's not any metal I know," Jake replied, his voice heavy with unease. He glanced around, feeling a chill creep up his spine. The tunnel, usually bustling with noise, now felt unnaturally quiet. Even the hum of the mining machines seemed distant, like a whisper. The colony's chief scientist, Dr. Elena Marlowe, was called to the site. She arrived quickly, her curiosity piqued. Dr. Marlowe was a sharp, no-nonsense woman, always ready to dive headfirst into the unknown. But when she saw the strange object buried in the rock, even her confidence wavered. "This isn't natural," she said softly, running her fingers over the smooth surface. "And it's not from Earth." The workers exchanged uneasy glances. They had heard stories of alien artifacts found on other worlds, relics of ancient civilizations long gone. Some were harmless, mere remnants of a forgotten past. Others, however, had unleashed horrors no one could explain. "What should we do?" Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Marlowe hesitated. "We excavated carefully," she said finally. "We need to understand what this is." Hours turned into days as the team worked tirelessly to unearth the object. As more of it was revealed, its shape became clearer, a large, oval structure with intricate patterns etched into its surface. The patterns pulsed faintly with a blue light, almost like it was alive. No one could figure out how it was powered or what its purpose was. Then the strange occurrences began. First, the colony's communication systems started malfunctioning. Messages to and from Earth became garbled, filled with static and strange noises. The engineers couldn't explain it. Equipment that had worked perfectly the day before now sparked and failed without warning. Lights flickered, and the air seemed heavier, harder to breathe. "What the hell is going on?" Jake demanded one evening as the power flickered for the third time that hour. The workers were on edge, their usual banter replaced by nervous whispers. "It's just a coincidence," Dr. Marlowe insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. She spent long hours in the lab, studying the artifact. But the more she tried to understand it, the more questions arose. Its surface emitted an energy field that interfered with their instruments, making it impossible to get accurate readings. Then came the shadows. At first, they were dismissed as tricks of the light, the result of flickering lamps in the dim tunnels. But soon, workers began reporting seeing figures in the darkness, shapes that moved when no one was there, eyes that seemed to watch from the corners. One miner swore he felt something brushed past him, cold and silent. "I'm not going back in there," he declared, his face pale and his hands trembling. "There's something in the mines, something watching us." Jake tried to calm the growing fear among the workers, but deep down, he felt it too. That sense of being watched, of something lurking just beyond the edge of sight. Dr. Marlowe, however, refused to abandon the excavation. "We're on the verge of a breakthrough," she insisted. "This artifact could be the discovery of the century." But Jake wasn't so sure. Whatever they had uncovered, it didn't feel like a discovery. It felt like a warning. The turning point came late one night. A deep hum reverberated through the colony, shaking the walls and waking everyone from their sleep. The artifact, now fully excavated, began to glow brighter, its patterns shifting and pulsing faster. The hum grew louder, drowning out every other sound. Jake and Dr. Marlowe rushed to the site, joined by the rest of the team. They watched in stunned silence as the artifact seemed to come alive. The air crackled with energy, and the ground beneath their feet trembled. "We need to shut it down," Jake shouted, though he had no idea how. Before anyone could react, the artifact emitted a blinding flash of light. A shockwave rippled through the colony, knocking everyone to the ground. When the light faded, the artifact floated in the air, glowing with an ominous intensity. Dr. Marlowe stared in horror. "It's not just an object," she whispered. "It's a signal." "A signal for what?" Jake asked, his voice shaking. Dr. Marlowe didn't answer. She didn't have to. Somewhere in the distance, a low guttural sound echoed through the tunnels, a sound that didn't belong to any human. The rising menace had awakened. The arrival of the fleet. The distress signal from Outpost Vega 9 reached Earth in fragments, distorted by static and garbled transmissions. Yet what little information made it through was enough to send chills down the spines of the United Earth Alliance Command. Unidentified artifact, unknown energy source, hostile activity were the only decipherable phrases. Within hours, the EUS Resolute, Earth's most advanced exploration vessel, was dispatched. Captain Nora Callan, a battle-hardened commander with decades of experience, was tasked with leading the mission. Though she was known for her calm demeanor, the words in the briefing gnawed at her. An ancient artifact. Hostile activity. It sounded like the beginning of one of those stories that rarely ended well. "Whatever this is, we'll figure it out," she assured her crew, though even she wasn't entirely convinced. The Resolute and its escort fleet, 2 frigates and a science vessel, cut through the darkness of space toward Vega 9. As they approached, the crew noticed strange anomalies in the surrounding area. Navigation systems flickered, long-range sensors picked up faint, unexplainable signals, and even the stars themselves seemed to dim, as though the universe was holding its breath. "Captain," said Lieutenant Arjun, her second in command, "we're picking up something odd. It's faint, but there's a repeating signal, like a heartbeat." "A heartbeat," Callan frowned, leaning over his console. The rhythmic pattern was faint but unmistakable, a low, pulsing hum that seemed to resonate deep within the ship's structure. "Where is it coming from?" Arjun shook his head. "Everywhere. The colony, space, even the artifact itself. We can't pinpoint it." As they drew closer, the full image of Outpost Vega 9 came into view on the main screen. The colony appeared intact, its buildings standing in silence under the cold starlight. But something about it felt wrong. The lights were out, and no movement could be seen. It was as if the colony had been frozen in time. "Open a channel," Callan ordered. "Vega 9, this is Captain Nora Callan of the EUS Resolute. We received your distress signal. Do you copy?" Static answered her. She tried again. "Vega 9, respond. Is anyone there?" This time, a faint voice broke through the static, a whisper almost too soft to hear. "Don't come. It's awake." The voice sent shivers down the spine of everyone on the bridge. Callan's eyes narrowed. "Who is this? What's awake? Identify yourself." But the voice didn't respond. Instead, the static grew louder, almost deafening, before abruptly cutting off. "We've lost the signal," Arjun said, his voice tight. Callan straightened. "Prepare a landing party. We're going down." The team touched down in the heart of the colony, armed with both weapons and scanners. The silence was suffocating. Dust swirled in the stale air, and the once bustling settlement was now a ghost town. The only sound was the faint hum of the artifact, which grew louder as they moved closer to the mines. "This place is giving me the creeps," muttered Sergeant Vance, his rifle held tightly. "Where is everyone?" "They didn't just disappear," Dr. Elena Marlowe, the lead scientist from the fleet, replied sharply. She scanned the area with her device, which beeped erratically. "There's residual energy everywhere, like the air itself is alive." The team split into groups, cautiously searching for survivors. Inside one of the dormitories, Captain Callan found signs of a struggle: overturned furniture, claw-like marks gouged into the walls. And then she saw the blood. It was smeared across the floor in jagged streaks, leading toward the mines. "Captain," Arjun's voice crackled over the comm. "You need to see this." Callan and her group rushed to the central square, where Arjun and his team stood frozen. Their eyes were locked on the artifact, now fully exposed and floating a meter above the ground. It pulsed with a blue glow, its patterns shifting in hypnotic, almost organic movements. "It wasn't doing that before," Dr. Marlowe whispered, her voice trembling. As they approached, the hum grew louder, vibrating through their bones. The artifact seemed to react to their presence, its glow intensifying. "Scanners are going haywire," Marlowe muttered, her fingers flying across her device. "This thing is emitting energy levels off the charts. It's like it's alive." Before Callan could respond, a loud clang echoed through the square. Everyone turned, weapons raised, as a figure stumbled out of the shadows. It was a man, one of the miners. His clothes were torn, his face pale and gaunt, and his eyes wide with terror. "They're in the shadows," he rasped, collapsing to his knees. "You have to leave. It's too late. Too late." Callan knelt beside him, gripping his shoulders. "What's too late? What's in the shadows?" The man's eyes darted around, as if he could see something no one else could. "It's awake," he whispered, "and it's hungry." Before anyone could react, the artifact emitted a sharp, piercing sound. The man screamed, clutching his head, and collapsed lifelessly to the ground. The team was thrown into chaos as the shadows around them began to shift and move, creeping closer like liquid darkness. "Fall back," Callan shouted, her voice cutting through the panic. "Get to the ship. Now." As they ran, the shadows seemed to reach for them, tendrils of darkness slithering across the ground. The artifact's glow intensified, casting an eerie light that only made the shadows seem darker. Back aboard the Resolute, Callan stood on the bridge, her mind racing. The artifact wasn't just an object. It was something far worse: a beacon, a trap, a door to something ancient and malevolent. As she stared out the viewport at the silent colony below, she whispered to herself, "What have we just unleashed?" Cliffhanger. In the distance, on the edges of their sensors, a fleet of unknown ships began to appear, drawn by the signal of the rising menace. The silent colony. Back on the Resolute, Captain Nora Callan stood at the edge of the viewport, staring down at the silent colony below. The shadows that had shifted and attacked her crew were not something natural. They were alive, driven by the artifact's strange energy. The question was, why? And what were they waiting for? "Captain," Lieutenant Arjun's voice interrupted her thoughts. "We're getting some readings from the artifact. Whatever it is, the energy signature is spreading. It's not just in the colony anymore. It's reaching into orbit." Callan turned sharply. "Into orbit? Are you saying it's coming for us?" "Not directly," Arjun replied, hesitating. "But the energy field is expanding. If it keeps growing, it could disable the entire fleet." Callan clenched her jaw. "We need answers. Prep a science team. We're going back down." The team landed again, this time fully prepared. Enhanced environmental suits were deployed to shield them from the energy field, and the security detail was doubled. Dr. Marlowe insisted on joining, her scientific curiosity outweighing her fear. The colony was even more unsettling this time. The air felt thicker, heavier, as if the planet itself were holding its breath. Equipment malfunctioned intermittently, and shadows seemed to cling to every corner, just out of reach of their lights. As they approached the artifact, Dr. Marlowe activated a new scanning device she had rigged from the ship's systems. The artifact pulsed in response, its glowing patterns twisting into shapes that almost looked like symbols. "Do you see this?" Marlowe whispered, her eyes glued to the screen. "These patterns, they're not random. They're a language." Callan frowned. "A language? Can you decipher it?" "I can try," Marlowe replied, her fingers moving rapidly over the controls. The symbols continued to shift, faster and faster, as though the artifact was reacting to her efforts. "It's like it knows we're trying to understand it." Suddenly, the artifact emitted a low, resonant hum that vibrated through the ground. The team froze, their lights flickering wildly. The shadows around them began to move again, but this time, they didn't stay in the corners. They surged forward, forming shapes, humanoid, but wrong, twisted, distorted. "Shadows incoming," one of the security officers shouted, raising his weapon. "Hold your fire," Callan ordered. "We don't know what they are yet." But the shadows didn't wait. They lunged toward the team, their forms shifting and writhing. One officer screamed as a tendril of darkness wrapped around his arm, pulling him into the shadows. His body vanished without a trace. "Fall back," Callan shouted, firing her rifle. The shots seemed to pass through the shadows, doing little to slow them down. The team retreated toward the landing zone, but the shadows pursued them relentlessly. As they ran, Marlowe shouted, "Wait, look at the artifact." Callan glanced back. The artifact was glowing brighter than ever, and the symbols on its surface had stopped shifting. They now formed a single, coherent message. It's a warning," Marlowe gasped, her voice trembling. "It says, 'The seal is broken.'" The team barely made it back to the ship, the shadows stopping just short of the ramp, as if bound by an invisible barrier. As the Resolute lifted off, Callan couldn't shake the feeling that they had only scratched the surface of the danger. Back on the Resolute, Marlowe worked tirelessly to analyze the data she had gathered. The artifact's language was ancient, unlike anything humanity had encountered before. But it wasn't just a warning. It was also a plea. "The artifact wasn't designed to harm us," she explained during the emergency briefing. "It was designed to keep something locked away, something that's been asleep for eons." Callan narrowed her eyes. "And we woke it up." Marlowe nodded grimly. "Whatever was sealed away, it's loose now. And it's growing stronger." As if on cue, alarms blared across the ship. "Captain," Arjun shouted from the bridge. "We've got incoming." Callan rushed to the command deck, her stomach dropping at the sight on the main screen. A fleet of massive dark ships was emerging from the far side of the planet. Their designs were alien, unlike anything in the human database, and they were heading straight for the Resolute. "Are they responding to the artifact's signal?" Callan asked. "Most likely," Arjun replied. "But they don't look friendly." "Shields up," Callan ordered. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers." As the alien fleet closed in, the artifact on the planet began to pulse again, its light visible even from orbit. The same humming sound resonated through the ship, and for a moment, Callan swore she could hear something else. A voice. Faint, distorted, but unmistakable. It wasn't a language she recognized, but the message was clear. "Run." "Captain," Marlowe said urgently, "we need to leave. Now." The artifact isn't just calling the fleet. It's calling something much worse. Callan didn't need convincing. "Helm, get us out of here. Full speed to the nearest jump point." The Resolute turned sharply, engines roaring as it raced toward the edge of the system. But the alien fleet was faster, their ships gaining ground with alarming speed. Energy weapons lit up the void, narrowly missing the human ships. "Return fire," Callan commanded, her voice steady despite the chaos. The Resolute's weapons roared to life, striking one of the alien ships and sending it spiraling into the planet below. But for every ship they damage, more seemed to appear, emerging from the darkness like predators stalking their prey. Cliffhanger. Just as the Resolute reached the jump point, the artifact on Vega 9 emitted a final blinding pulse. In its wake, a massive rift opened in space, a swirling vortex of darkness that seemed to devour the light itself. From within the rift, a shadowy form began to emerge, its sheer size dwarfing even the largest of the alien ships. Callan stared in horror. What in God's name is that? Marlowe's voice was barely a whisper. The menace. It's here. The menace revealed. The Resolute floated in the vastness of space, its crew frozen as they stared at the monstrosity emerging from the rift. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't a creature. It was something far worse, a shifting mass of shadow and energy, its form defying logic and reason. The black tendrils extended outward, writhing like living things, their sheer size capable of enveloping the alien fleet entirely. The void around it seemed to bend, as though reality itself struggled to contain its presence. "Report," Captain Callan demanded, her voice sharp but steady. "Captain." Arjun's voice faltered, his hands trembling over the controls. I don't even know how to describe this. The readings are off the charts. It's consuming everything around it. The alien ship's air." He stopped mid-sentence. On the screen, the alien fleet opened fire on the entity, their energy weapons streaking toward it like fireworks. But the attacks vanished the moment they made contact, absorbed into the void of its form. The shadow retaliated. One by one, the alien ships were swallowed whole, their lights flickering out as they disappeared into its depths. The crew watched in horror as the alien fleet, so menacing moments ago, was reduced to nothing in seconds. "This isn't a battle," Marlowe whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's a massacre." Inside the rift's grasp, as the entity grew stronger, the artifact on Vega 9 pulsed violently, sending shockwaves through space. Marlowe stood at her station, her hands flying across the console, as she tried to make sense of the data. "The artifact is linked to it," she said. "It's like a tether, anchoring it to our dimension. The energy we fed into it when we unearthed it. It must have broken the seal." Callan's mind raced. "So we're responsible for this thing breaking loose." Marlowe nodded grimly. "And if we don't stop it, it's going to spread. The energy field is growing. At this rate, it'll consume this entire sector within hours." "Suggestions," Callan demanded. "Destroy the artifact," Marlowe replied. "If it's the anchor, severing the connection might force the entity back into the rift." Arjun turned to her, his face pale. "We've tried to destroy the artifact before. Weapons don't work on it. What's to say this will?" "It's not about firepower," Marlowe said. "The artifact isn't just a physical object. It's resonating on a specific frequency. If we disrupt that frequency, we might destabilize it." "How?" Callan pressed. "With a harmonic pulse," Marlowe replied. "But it would have to be powerful enough to reach the core of the artifact. We'd need to use the Resolute's reactor." The room fell silent. "You're suggesting we use the ship's main reactor to generate the pulse," Arjun said, his voice filled with disbelief. "That would overload the systems. If it fails, we'd be dead in seconds." "It's a risk," Marlowe admitted, "but it's the only chance we have." The plan in motion. The crew scrambled to implement the plan. Engineers worked tirelessly in the reactor room, reconfiguring the systems to emit the pulse. Meanwhile, Callan prepared her team for a final descent to the planet. The pulse would have to be activated from the surface, close enough to the artifact to ensure success. As the landing team suited up, Callan addressed them. "We've all seen what we're up against. This isn't just about the colony, or the fleet, or even this planet. If we fail, this thing will spread, and nothing will stop it. We didn't ask for this fight, but it's ours now. Let's make it count." Her words were met with grim nods. Everyone knew the stakes. There would be no second chances. Descent into darkness. The landing craft touched down near the artifact, its engines roaring as it fought against the growing energy field. The team disembarked quickly, their suits shielding them from the intense radiation. The shadows were back, swirling around the artifact like predators waiting for their prey. "This place is alive," one of the soldiers muttered, his voice shaking. "It's watching us." "Focus," Callan snapped. "We don't have much time." Marlowe worked frantically to set up the harmonic emitter, her fingers trembling as she connected the components. The artifact glowed brighter, its patterns shifting faster as though it sensed their intent. "It's reacting," Marlowe said. "I need more time." "You don't have it," Callan shouted. The shadows surged toward them, and the soldiers opened fire. The rounds slowed the tendrils but didn't stop them. One soldier screamed as a shadow pierced his armor, dragging him into the darkness. "Hold them off," Callan ordered, firing her weapon. "Marlowe, hurry." The pulse activated. With seconds to spare, Marlowe activated the harmonic emitter. A powerful wave of sound erupted from the device, resonating through the air. The artifact shuddered, its glow flickering as the patterns on its surface began to destabilize. "It's working," Marlowe cried. But the entity in the rift reacted violently. The ground trembled, and the shadows grew more aggressive, their movements erratic. The artifact pulsed one last time, emitting a deafening roar that knocked everyone to the ground. And then it cracked. The artifact shattered into fragments, releasing a blinding light that consumed the shadows. The rift above began to collapse, the massive entity screeching as it was dragged back into the void. For a moment, everything was silent. Cliffhanger. The aftermath. Back on the Resolute, the crew monitored the energy field as it began to dissipate. Cheers erupted on the bridge, but Callan wasn't celebrating. She stared at the wreckage of the artifact on the surface below, her gut telling her it wasn't over. Marlowe's voice cut through the static. "Captain, I'm picking up another signal." Callan frowned. "From the artifact?" "No," Marlowe replied, her voice trembling. "It's coming from somewhere deeper, below the surface." Before Callan could respond, the screen flickered, displaying new data. A massive structure, buried kilometers beneath the artifact, was coming online. The menace wasn't just rising. It had always been here, and they had only scratched the surface. Humanity's resolve. The bridge of the Resolute buzzed with chaotic energy as the crew processed the discovery of the massive underground structure. Every sensor was now focused on Vega 9, revealing what lay hidden beneath its surface. A sprawling network of tunnels and chambers, centered around an enormous object pulsing with energy. Captain Callan stared at the screen, her heart heavy with dread. "That's not natural," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's a machine." "It's more than a machine," Dr. Marlowe said, her tone grim as she analyzed the data. "This structure predates the artifact. It's been here for thousands, maybe millions of years. The artifact wasn't just a seal. It was a key." The room fell silent. The implications were clear. The artifact hadn't been containing the menace. It had been guarding something far worse. "Captain," Arjun interrupted, his voice tight. "The energy readings are spiking again. Whatever's down there, it's waking up." Callan clenched her fists. "Get me options. Now." The underground menace. The science team worked frantically, piecing together the fragmented data from the artifact. What they found chilled them to the bone. The underground structure wasn't just a machine. It was a weapon. And it wasn't human. The patterns and symbols on the artifact matched those found in the chambers, suggesting an ancient, long-extinct civilization had built the system. "It's a planetary defense system," Marlowe explained, her voice trembling. "But not to protect the planet. It's designed to destroy anything in its vicinity. Ships, stations, even planets. If it fully activates, it'll wipe this entire sector clean." "Why would anyone build something like this?" Callan asked, her voice sharp. Marlowe hesitated. Maybe they were desperate. Maybe they wanted to ensure no one could reclaim their world after they were gone. Or maybe, she trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Or maybe it was never meant to defend anything, Callan said grimly. Maybe it was always meant to destroy. The plan. A desperate gamble. The only way to stop the structure from fully activating was to reach its core and disable it manually. But the deeper they went, the more dangerous it would become. The shadows were gone, but the energy field around the structure was growing stronger, interfering with both communications and navigation. We can't send an entire team down there, Callan said. The interference would kill them before they got close. I'll go, Marlowe said, stepping forward. I know the systems. I understand the patterns. I can shut it down. No, Callan replied firmly. You're the only one who can make sense of this data. We need you here. She turned to Arjun. Prep a strike team. I'm leading it. Captain, that's suicide. Arjun protested. We'll lose you and anyone you take with you. If we don't do this, there won't be anything left to lose, Callan said. Her voice carried a weight of finality that silenced the room. Prep the shuttle. We launch in 10. Into the depths. The strike team descended into the tunnels, navigating the maze-like corridors of the underground structure. The walls hummed with energy, glowing faintly as if alive. Strange, mechanical sounds echoed in the distance, growing louder the deeper they went. Stay sharp, Callan whispered. We don't know what's down here. As they moved, the team encountered remnants of the ancient civilization that had built the structure. Statues of strange, humanoid figures, their faces obscured by intricate helmets. The air was thick with a sense of foreboding, as if the ghosts of the builders still lingered. Suddenly, the ground trembled, and the walls lit up with pulsating lights. A deep, resonant hum filled the chamber, and the path ahead shifted, revealing a massive gateway. That's the core, Callan said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. Let's move. The core. A deadly obstacle. The core was a vast, spherical chamber filled with swirling energy. At its center was a massive control console, surrounded by rotating rings that crackled with electricity. But they weren't alone. Mechanical constructs, towering, spider-like machines, emerged from the walls, their glowing red eyes locking onto the team. Contact. One of the soldiers shouted, opening fire. The constructs moved with alarming speed, deflecting bullets with their armored limbs. The team scattered, trying to draw their attention, while Callan made her way to the console. Marlowe, I'm at the controls, Callan said over the comm. What do I do? Look for a central panel, Marlowe replied. It should have a series of glowing symbols. You'll need to input a shutdown sequence. Callan's fingers flew over the panel, trying to match the symbols with Marlowe's instructions. Behind her, the battle raged on, her team fighting desperately to hold off the constructs. Hurry, Captain. Arjun's voice crackled through the comm. We can't hold them much longer. The sacrifice. As Callan neared the end of the sequence, the core began to destabilize. Energy surged through the chamber, and the constructs became more aggressive, as if sensing their end. Captain. Marlowe's voice cut through the chaos. The core's going critical. You need to finish the sequence and get out of there now. Callan hesitated, her eyes scanning the console. She knew there wouldn't be enough time. If she left now, the sequence would reset, and the core would fully activate. There was only one choice. Captain, do you copy? Marlowe shouted. I copy, Callan said, her voice calm. Tell my crew, they did good, and tell Earth to remember us. With that, she pressed the final button. The menace is contained. The core emitted a deafening roar as the sequence completed. The energy rings collapsed inward, and the entire structure began to disintegrate. The strike team scrambled back to the shuttle, but Callan remained behind, ensuring the system stayed offline until the very end. From orbit, the crew of the Resolute watched as the energy field around Vega 9 dissipated, the structure collapsing in on itself. The rift in space closed, and the entity vanished, sealed away once more. Cliffhanger. A new threat. Back on the Resolute, Marlowe analyzed the final data transmission from the core. What she found left her pale. "Captain," Arjun said, his voice heavy with grief. "Callan's sacrifice saved us." "She saved us from this," Marlowe replied, her eyes glued to the screen. But the core wasn't just a weapon. It was a signal. "A signal?" Arjun asked, his brow furrowing. "To what?" Marlowe turned to him, her face grim. "To something bigger, and now it knows we're here." The final stand. The Resolute floated in silence, its crew shaken by the loss of Captain Callan and the realization of what they had uncovered. The core's destruction had saved the system, for now. But Dr. Marlowe's discovery loomed over them like a dark cloud. The artifact wasn't just a prison, and the core wasn't merely a weapon. Together, they had been a beacon, sending a signal into the void. And now, something was answering that call. Captain Callan's sacrifice wasn't the end, Marlowe said, her voice trembling as she stood in front of the command deck. It was the beginning. The signal. It's been received. By what? Arjun asked, his tone sharp. He had taken command of the Resolute, but the weight of the situation bore heavily on him. Marlowe hesitated, staring at the data on her console. "I don't know, but it's massive. Whatever it is, it's coming." The incoming fleet. Moments later, the sensors lit up, and alarms blared across the ship. A fleet of unidentified ships appeared at the edge of the system. They were colossal, their dark forms blotting out the stars. These weren't like the ships from before. These were something older, something built for war on a scale beyond comprehension. "They're moving fast," the tactical officer reported. "ETA to our position. 20 minutes. Raise shields. Prep all weapons," Arjun ordered, "and get me comms with Earth." The message to Earth was brief but urgent. Prepare for the worst. The fleet's mere presence disrupted long-range communications, and there was no guarantee the warning would even reach home in time. "We can't face them alone," Arjun said, his voice low as he turned to Marlowe. "If they get past us, Earth won't stand a chance." Desperate preparations. With time running out, the crew worked tirelessly to fortify the Resolute and its small fleet. Engineers scrambled to reinforce the shields, boost the reactor's output, and retrofit the weapons for maximum firepower. The frigates were armed to the teeth, ready to sacrifice themselves to buy time for the Resolute to deliver a final blow. Meanwhile, Marlowe continued to analyze the signals coming from the approaching fleet. She discovered that the ships were communicating with each other in the same ancient language as the artifact. Their purpose wasn't just destruction. They were searching for something. "They're looking for the source of the signal," Marlowe explained. The artifact and the core weren't just sending a message. They were guarding something. "These ships are the response team, and they think we have it." "What could we possibly have that they want?" Arjun asked. Marlowe's eyes widened as realization dawned. Callan's last act. She didn't just destroy the core, she transferred its data to our systems. The signal's blueprint is embedded in the Resolute's database. "Then we're the target," Arjun said grimly. "And they won't stop until they get it." The battle begins. The alien fleet entered the system, their ships moving with eerie precision. The Resolute's fleet met them head-on, firing everything they had. Explosions lit up the void as missiles and energy blasts collided with the enemy ships. But the alien vessels seemed impervious, shrugging off the attacks like they were nothing. One of the frigates was hit, its shields collapsing as a massive energy beam tore through its hull. The ship exploded in a brilliant flash, and the crew of the Resolute watched in horror as the debris scattered across space. "Focus fire on their lead ship," Arjun ordered. The Resolute's main cannon roared to life, sending a concentrated blast of energy toward the largest of the alien ships. The shot hit its mark, punching a hole through the ship's outer hull. But instead of faltering, the ship seemed to regenerate, its structure repairing itself in seconds. "They're adapting," Marlowe said, panic creeping into her voice. "Our weapons won't hold them off for long." The hidden weapon. As the battle raged, Marlowe's scans revealed something unexpected. Deep within the core's data, she found a fail-safe, a counter-signal designed to disrupt the alien fleet systems. The builders of the artifact had anticipated this scenario, creating a weapon that could turn the tide. "It's a frequency," Marlowe explained, her fingers flying across the console. "If we broadcast it, it'll destabilize their ships. But the power required to amplify it." She trailed off, looking at Arjun. "The Resolute's reactor," Arjun said, finishing her thought. "It'll overload the ship." "It's the only way," Marlowe said. "But we'll need to get close, inside their fleet, to make it work." The final push. Arjun made the call. "Divert all power to shields and engines. We're taking the fight to them." The Resolute surged forward, weaving through the chaos of the battlefield as the alien fleet closed in. The remaining frigate and the science vessel provided cover, sacrificing themselves to buy precious seconds. Inside the Resolute, the crew worked with desperate determination. Engineers pushed the reactor to its limits, while Marlowe calibrated the counter-signal. The ship trembled under the strain, its systems on the verge of collapse. "Signal ready," Marlowe said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "Do it," Arjun ordered. The broadcast. The counter-signal erupted from the Resolute, a piercing wave of energy that spread across the battlefield. The alien ships faltered, their movements erratic as the frequency disrupted their systems. One by one, they began to collapse, their massive forms crumbling into debris. Cheers erupted on the bridge, but the celebration was short-lived. The Resolute's reactor was failing, its systems overheating as the counter-signal drained its power. The ship shook violently, alarms blaring as the crew scrambled to contain the damage. "Arjun," Marlowe said, her voice quiet. "We're not going to make it." Cliffhanger. The unknown response. As the last of the alien fleet was destroyed, the Resolute drifted in silence, its power fading. The crew braced for the worst, but then the sensors picked up something new, a second signal, originating from deep space. It's different," Marlowe said, staring at the screen. "It's not hostile." "What is it?" Arjun asked. Marlowe turned to him, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and hope. "It's a message. From the builders." The signal carried a single phrase, repeated over and over. "Prepare. The true menace is coming. Triumph and revelation." The crew of the Resolute sat in stunned silence as the message repeated across every screen on the bridge. "Prepare. The true menace is coming." The battle against the alien fleet had cost them dearly, and now they faced a new, even more terrifying threat. Whatever the builders of the artifact had locked away, this was only the beginning. Lieutenant Arjun broke the silence, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "Marlowe, can you decode any more from the signal? What exactly are we supposed to prepare for?" Dr. Marlowe's hands trembled as she worked furiously at her console. "It's fragmented," she said, her voice barely audible. But the builders left more than just a warning. They left instructions. The crew watched as a holographic projection appeared on the main screen. It displayed a map of the galaxy, with a pulsating red dot on its farthest edge, a region of space uncharted and inaccessible to humans. "This is their origin point," Marlowe explained. "The builders came from here. Whatever they locked away, it's waking up there." Arjun frowned, staring at the map. "And the signal we just destroyed?" "It was an early warning system," Marlowe replied. "The builders must have known that the menace would try to escape. They created the artifact and the core to act as a shield, delaying its spread. But when we activated the artifact, we broke the delay. Now it's free. A fleeting victory." Despite the devastation, the crew worked tirelessly to stabilize the Resolute. The reactor had been pushed to its limits, and the ship was barely operational. Of the original fleet, only the Resolute remained, its hull scared and its systems faltering. Yet they were alive. And in the cold vastness of space, survival itself felt like a victory. "Status report," Arjun ordered, his voice steady despite the weight on his shoulders. "We've got minimal power," the chief engineer replied. "The reactor's holding, but it's fragile. Weapons are offline. Shields are at 5%. We're limping, sir." Arjun turned to Marlowe. "How much time do we have before this true menace reaches us?" Marlowe shook her head. "It's not coming here, yet, but it's spreading. Based on these calculations, we have weeks, maybe months, before it consumes more systems. And when it does, it'll head for the center of the galaxy. For Earth." Arjun's jaw tightened. "Then we have to warn them." The Builder's legacy. As the Resolute drifted in orbit around Vega 9, Marlowe continued decoding the Builder's signal. The more she unraveled, the more she realized how little humanity understood about the galaxy's ancient history. The Builders weren't just architects of the artifact. They were warriors, guardians of a fragile balance that had existed for millennia. They called themselves the Kithari, Marlowe explained during the emergency briefing. They were one of the first civilizations to reach the stars, millions of years ago, but their curiosity led them to something they couldn't control. They called it the Devourer. The name hung in the air like a shadow. "What is it?" Arjun asked. "A cosmic entity," Marlowe said, her voice trembling. "It doesn't just destroy, it consumes. Stars, planets, entire civilizations. The Kithari tried to fight it, but even they couldn't stop it. So they sealed it away, using the artifact and the core as part of an enormous prison system. But the prison wasn't perfect. Over time, cracks formed. And now, it's awake." The message from Earth. The communications array sputtered to life, and a faint signal from Earth broke through the static. The United Earth Alliance Command had received the Resolute's initial distress call and sent reinforcements, but their response carried grim news. "Arjun," the Admiral's voice crackled over the comm, "we've detected the signal from Vega 9 spreading to other systems. Reports are coming in of similar artifacts activating across the outer colonies. Whatever you're dealing with, it's not isolated. It's global." Arjun clenched his fists. "We've managed to disable one signal, but the source is far bigger than we anticipated. Earth needs to prepare for a galactic-scale threat." "We're mobilizing the fleet," the Admiral replied. "But if what you're saying is true, we'll need more than ships. We'll need answers, and it sounds like your crew is the only one with them." The decision. The crew faced an impossible choice: return to Earth to warn humanity and bolster their defenses, or follow the Builder's map to the edge of the galaxy to confront the menace at its source. Both options carried immense risk. If they returned to Earth, they might not have time to uncover the secrets of the Builder's technology. But if they ventured deeper into uncharted space, they could be heading straight into a trap. "We don't have the resources for both," Arjun said, his gaze fixed on Marlowe. "If we go, we're on our own." Marlowe nodded. "But if we don't go, Earth won't stand a chance." The crew debated fiercely, but in the end, the decision fell to Arjun. He stood before the battered crew, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "We're explorers," he said. "We're the ones who uncovered this menace, and we're the only ones who have a chance of stopping it. If we don't take that chance, no one else will." The final journey. The Resolute set a course for the Builder's origin point, its engines sputtering but holding. The crew braced themselves for the unknown, their determination outweighing their fear. Along the way, Marlowe continued decoding the Builder's data, uncovering fragments of their history and clues to their ultimate weapon, a technology that could potentially stop the menace, but at a cost no one wanted to imagine. As the ship left the Vega 9 system behind, the stars ahead seemed darker, colder, as if the galaxy itself were warning them to turn back. But there was no turning back now. Cliffhanger, the galaxy's true enemy. As the Resolute neared the edge of the galaxy, the sensors picked up a faint, irregular signal. It wasn't the builder's language this time. It was human. "What is that?" Arjun asked, leaning forward. Marlowe's face went pale as she analyzed the data. "It's a distress signal. From another Earth ship." The bridge fell silent. No other Earth ships had been sent this far into uncharted space. The signal was old, its origin point surrounded by the faint remnants of an ancient battle. "Put it on screen," Arjun said. The audio crackled to life, filled with static and a single chilling phrase. "They're here, and they're worse than we imagined." The crew exchanged uneasy glances as the Resolute drifted closer to the source. Ahead of them lay a graveyard of ships, some alien, some eerily familiar. And beyond the wreckage, the darkness stirred. The menace wasn't just coming. It had already begun.